Hello and welcome. You're listening to Start Again with Shauna Lee, the place where you will be reminded that it's never too late and you're never too old to do the damn thing. So stick around if you're ready to vibe higher and be inspired to chase your dreams. Together, we will uncover your soul's truest desires. Now, if you're ready, let's get started. Hello, my friends, and welcome back. Thanks for joining again today. I am going to introduce you to Drasmin today. She is a woman of many titles, so I am going to, first of all, say thank you, Drasmin, for being with me today.
Thank you, Shauna, for having me today on your show.
Absolutely. I love to get the conversation started with just a quick little intro from you. If you wouldn't mind telling my audience who you are, what you do, and specifically how you've embraced this idea of starting again.
So, what a broad question. Who am I is really the question that even Shakespeare talks about in his writings, and it is a question that is carried through the ages. And I feel that ultimately I am a being in the human experience, experiencing itself, experiencing life. Yet within the human experience, I oscillate between many talents, many skills, many passions. And so I consider myself, an artist, a writer, a prayer form dancer. Within my workscape, I am a soul purpose activator, trauma informed empowerment coach, multidimensional sound healer, and shamanic guide. And the idea of starting again, I feel that question is tied into every breath. Every breath is truly an opportunity to start again. Even if a moment ago we say something or do something on quote unquote the scale of dumb, that breath is an opportunity to just start again and just say, oh, okay, I'm having a human experience. Let's do over. And then every day is an opportunity to wake up and plug into the supercomputer of the mind, what programs want to be run that day. We have the power of free will and choice in this experience of life to start again in every breath, in every moment. And I really embrace this idea of starting again because it allows for gentleness. It invites for a curiosity. It opens the heart for continued expansion of evolution, and it also invites others into that same space of, hey, you know what, the past, even if the past was 5 seconds ago, is in the past. What is important and all that really
Mhm.
exists is the now. And so for me, starting again is really not really a starting, more of a continuation, yet with a pause between each moment that feels like a start over, yet is really a build up on the previous.
Yes, that might be the most beautiful description that I have heard in response to that question. So thank you for that. I agree with everything that you've said. And when I was kind of formulating how I was going to title the podcast, it was a lot of what you just said. It was this choose again, um, these choose again moments that we have where it feels like we're starting over, but we're never truly starting over from scratch because we're starting over with experience. We are
Mm.
choosing again from a place of more experience, more lessons, perhaps more mistakes. I do in quotation. Um, it's just we gather all this wisdom and knowledge and experience along the way, and then we get to choose again. And that's kind of the best way that I found to describe that was this starting again. But you're right. I think a lot of people think about that in terms of these monumental life events when, like, the big terrible shit has happened, and we have this moment of, oh my God, what do I do now? But the way you've described it is much gentler and a little more easygoing and kind of free flowing in that we have those moments throughout every day where we get to choose again. And you beautifully described what it is and why I've done this podcast. So thank you for that. So you listed off quite a few different things which you do. Um, Tell us a little bit about your journey and how you've come to create that as your toolbox, because really it's these are the modalities that you are leaning into. Um, but how did you settle in any one of these, and kind of talk us through that journey of how you got there? Hmm.
Whew.
It's a loaded
Well,
question, I
I'll
realize.
preface it is. And in fact, my journey is such a loaded question, so to speak, that I'm actually working on my second book
Nice.
where I talk about my rebirth into the my true self. So let me see how I can succinctly
Yes.
summarize here. My background, shall we say, up until my mid 20s was very science
Mm.
minded, very scientific. I, from the age of 6, had, for the most part, clarity that one day, technically by the age I was 25, because of my cultural upbringing and background, that I would be a
Mm.
doctor. And it wasn't until I was in my teens that I decided on either neuroscience or
Wow.
cardiology. I've always been fascinated by the brain, by the heart, by just how humans function. What is it about us that makes us, quote unquote, the superior
Hmm.
species? Not that I believe that we are a superior species, yet we are the species that has dominated the
Right.
world. And so I've always had this deep interest and love for science. So that's, one aspect of my backstory. On the other side of that, I was raised by non denominational Christian parents. So I was very much raised with an indoctrinated mindset of Christian theologies.
Hmm.
Now that all sounds like, oh, what a sweet little innocent childhood she's had, very nice. The reality of my childhood, however, is much
Hmm.
darker. I am a survivor of cultistic sex crimes against
Mm.
children. And that's where my story really begins to form. Because on one hand, I had this great education and parents who were on the forefront, leaders within their community. And yet my father had a lot of unresolved trauma, shall we say, within his psyche. And so he was very much a bit of a Jekyll and Hyde. He gave the appearance of, being a spiritual leader, yet behind closed doors, he took out all his pain and his aggression on me.
Hmm.
So on one hand, I was experiencing a lot of um, this pain from my father coming at me, and then simultaneously, I was going through these cultistic abusive rites that were being performed on children in witness of leaders of church,
Mm.
doctors, lawyers, elders, so on and so forth. And these things are something that is still existing in this world. I was raised in India, so when an opportunity, shall we say, was created for me to exit India at the age of 14, I took that opportunity and came to the US as a way to just escape the horrors of my
Hmm.
childhood. But because I had experienced so much of this for, almost 10 years, it had created a pattern within my
Yep.
consciousness. But the thing that kept me going was this dream, this vision to be a doctor, to be a neurosurgeon. I even had this desire to even maybe build an orphanage one day and gather all the babies in there and protect them and love them in a way that I hadn't received. My parents were of the mindset of, you're fed, you're clothed, you're educated, you can't ask for more.
Hmm.
Like, the talk of emotions and anything was just prohibited, shall we say, in the household. And so it was a very fractured childhood of, on one hand, I'm receiving God and love and Christ and goodness. And on the other hand, I'm receiving like the depths of darkness.
Hmm.
And so it created within me this fractured consciousness that was just held by my deep love for science and the dream that would carry me forward. And so I continued to focus on it. But by the time I hit my teens, there was so much pain and trauma within me that I fell into the trap of addiction with alcohol and drugs, and I overdosed at the age of
Oh, wow.
17. Um, I was in the hospital for a few days, and that was kind of one of my first wake up calls. Like, okay, I really do love my life. I don't want to just give it up with drugs. So I switched over from the heroin, cocaine that I was very much actively involved with to pharmaceuticals, which is just as bad, if not worse, because it's actually
Yes.
legalized. And so I found myself kind of numbing a lot of my emotions and feelings and everything, suppressing myself just so that I could show up, just so that I could keep going. I could keep showing up, doing my grades, working a 40-hour job, going to school full time
Hmm.
plus
Wow.
honors. And then by the time I hit my 24th year, I received a diagnosis from doctors. I was having issues with my hands where they were just swelling, turning black, and just I was having a hard time holding. I was working in the medical field at the time as a phlebotomist,
Mm.
a person who draws
So your
blood.
hands are somewhat important.
Yeah, so my hands were just like not functioning. I'm like shaking as I'm holding this needle in the
Yeah.
patient's arm. I'm like, this is not good. So I went to a
Hmm.
doctor, and their diagnosis was, well, there's nothing that we can visibly see or detect in these physiological, anatomical, neurological tests. So we don't have a diagnosis, but what we can tell you is by the time you're 30, you're not going to be able to hold a scalpel, let alone use your hands. So
Mm.
good luck to you. And
Wow.
that was a huge turning point for me. I was livid. I was like, this is unacceptable. I have devoted my life. This has been my anchor, my lighthouse, my beacon of hope through some
Right.
horrors of my childhood. And now you're telling me in this great country of the United States, where I think that anything is possible, the dream, everything the few movies I watched as a child is like, so you're telling me my dreams are over? Like, what do I do for myself? Like, I'm supposed to be a doctor by in less than a year, and I'm not quite there yet. And because my father was of Indian lineage, there was this expectation of me to be in med school, if not already have my doctorates by the time I was 25, and to be engaged, if not married. And I'm less than a year away from hitting that goal. And I had this belief within me that if I didn't reach that goal, that the devil would literally show up at my door and take me kicking and screaming to hell.
Oh,
So I
wow.
had this deep fear lodged within me that kept me going towards the beacon. So it's like such distorted, fragmented psyche within me. So when I
Hmm.
received this diagnosis, I was like, I do not accept. Middle finger up to the sky, up to the system. I refuse. This is not acceptable. I can't accept this. And yet I have less than a year to figure out what I can do about this.
Yeah,
And
yeah. I love how I love how you say I do not accept.
and that's kind of been like a motto that I've carried within me for my life. And I feel like that's something that does push me to keep going and to keep starting again is when I
Oh,
am faced
sure.
with something that is just inconceivable to me. I'm like, I do not accept. I do not accept that I am limited by a system or something outside of me when I am literally God. I am God in form. I'm goddess
Yes.
in flesh.
Yes.
I was raised with that ideology of, you are God. God fashioned you from his own flesh. So it's like,
Right,
there
right.
was all these thoughts within me. So it's like, okay, so what can I do? Okay, well, if I want to be a healer and a doctor, then I need to heal myself. So that triggered me into a deep nutritional journey that I'm still on.
Oh,
And
okay.
I spent 2 years studying nutrition, researching industries, studying where my food came from, and really starting
Hmm.
to like experiment on myself. And I started noticing myself get stronger and healthier. I was able to because I was so focused on my nutritional wellness, I also added in the physical aspect of it with taking kickboxing, tai chi, qigong. I was really just like I need to take care and fix my body. I was very much in the masculine mindset of I can do whatever I want if I put enough mind, heart, soul into it. And then
Yep.
I turned 25 and I woke up that rising and I was home alone. I was living with a partner at the time. I was home alone. And for a brief second, I swear, I was like, oh my gosh, the rapture has happened. My partner is gone. The devil is on his way. There's literally no one here. And it's hilarious, right? Like I talk about it. It's like,
No,
yeah,
it's
that's
not.
so
It,
funny. But
it
in the moment, I was like terrified. So I'm like,
no, I can totally picture it. Like you wake up and think, "Oh my god, it's happened. Everybody's gone." Like,
everybody's gone.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I didn't even know where my cat was. Like,
Oh
I don't
god.
know where she was. She had like left the house. I was like completely home alone. So I
Oh
crawl
wow.
out of bed and I go to the living room and there's a beautiful gift with a note from my partner. I was like, okay. And then I go to the patio and I see somebody walking their dog. I'm like,
Oh,
okay, maybe the
sign of
devil's
life.
coming from them, but I don't know. So let me go open the door. So I went and opened the door and there was no devil at my door. In that moment, I realized that I had the power of choice, that I wasn't bound by the limitations and the the preconceived life that I was programmed with from a young age. And that was another turning point.
Mhm.
I was like, oh, so what do I do now? Because up until then, my life had
Oh,
been
sure.
prescribed. It was like you go to school, you get into a partnership, you prepare for marriage. These are the steps. And at that point, all of a sudden, I was like, well, what do I do now?
Now what?
I don't know what to do with my life. And my father had passed away a few months ago around the same time. So that was one aspect of it. It's like I suddenly realized I had the power of choice, yet I didn't know what to do with that power of choice.
It reminds me of I'm going to sidebar a little bit. My oldest daughter, I have 4 children. And I've always told them the sky's the limit. You can do whatever you want. But it wasn't until my oldest daughter was in high school that I had said the same thing that I had always said to her: you can be anything you want to be. And she said, that's too big. It's too overwhelming.
Mhm.
I don't know what to do with that. And it kind of, that's what's coming through in your story is this, like, when you realize really it's open, it's a blank slate, it felt too big for her. And so that's when I was like, oh, I can help her, kind of guide her, hone her in based on what I know about her, limit it to the things that she would enjoy, but so it was containable for her. You know what I mean? But I can get that from your story where it was, now what? This moment, what do you
Right.
do?
Right. Now what? And, throughout this time, I'd been seeing counselors off and on to, attempt to just work through, I didn't want to be an addict. It was just the only way I knew how to cope. And the
Hmm.
partner I was with at that time, he kind of gave me an ultimatum. He's like, it's me
Mm,
or the drugs. It's me or the pills. So I was like, well, of course I want to be with you, but I continued to lie and,
hmm.
sneak in codeine. I kept myself addicted to like ibuprofen because it was over the counter and non-prescription. I found ways to continue to feed the habit even as I was actively working to break the habit because I really loved this man and
Hmm.
I thought I was going to spend the rest of my life with him. And around this time, I was seeing a counselor, an EMDR specialist. The first session changed
Mm,
my life, by the way. I
yes.
highly recommend EMDR to anyone who has complex trauma or who's just having a hard time with breaking through.
Yeah.
And she recommended painting. She's like, why don't you paint
Mhm.
to just, process your feelings, to just get the emotion out there? Now, I have some trauma around art and painting that I don't need to dive into. But I was like, okay, I'll take a risk. I'll take a chance. And that's how got started on my artistic journey as literally a way to just process.
Yes.
So all of a sudden, I have freedom of choice. My medical career is starting to crumble around me. And I have this canvas and so much possibility.
Yep.
So I started to paint and practice, and I discovered this skill within me, and it carried me through for a few years. I was painting, I was processing my feelings, I was discovering that I had this amazing skill for concept, design, balance. And so I switched my majors. Well, before I switched my majors, I was like, what else can I do in the medical field? Okay, maybe I could do midwifery. So I
Oh.
went and I got my doula certification. So I'm a birth doula and now I'm also a death doula. But within that, getting into, I applied for a midwifery school in Washington, but they rejected my application. Years later, I found out why. And then when that rejection came, I was like, okay, well, clearly, I keep striving to stay in the medical field. It's not happening. What else can I do? So I switched my majors to English and art because
Mm,
I loved creating. I'd been creating for a few years. I loved reading. I love everything about language. It just ties into the brain and how we process information. So I switched my major to English and art to see if I could find a different direction in life. And I was still continuing my own personal therapy, writing, creating. A couple years passed, and then I hit a plateau again. Like, okay, I'm feeling stagnant, I'm not growing, I'm not expanding. So what more can I do? What more can be done? And then I stumbled upon the story of the Buddha
mm.
in Herman Hesse's Siddhartha. And that was my introduction to meditation.
Oh,
It blew, that was another like light bulb moment that went off for me. I'm like, wait, so you can be rich, enlightened, and healthy?
mhm.
I want that. I don't
Yeah.
want to live in poverty. I want to be a multi-million dollar businesswoman who is like building schools all over the world and helping rescue children and like, you know, getting those women and children who are trapped in sex slavery out of those systems. I want to provide a space for them, but I also want to be healthy and I also want to be spiritual. So bring it on.
Mhm.
Let's go. And so I incorporated meditation into my everyday practice. And I started with 60 seconds every day because I read this quote Japanese teachings have of if you want to master something, give it full utmost concentration for 60 seconds at the same time every day, and that will build the muscle.
Yes.
So that's what I did. I set my alarm and every day started 60 seconds, but it would usually go for a couple minutes. And I just felt like, woo, look at me. I meditated for a few minutes
I
today.
did the
And
same
I do
thing.
encourage that with my clients as well. Like set little goals for yourself. So when you go beyond
Yeah.
that, you're like, whoa, look at me. I'm such a boss.
Well, yeah, because there it builds confidence as you do something, but it's a muscle, like you said. You're built. Well, this is what I always tell people. They call it a practice because it takes practice. And
Mm,
one, I started with 2 minutes of meditation, and I was because
mhm.
I think the very first time I sat down and I tried to do like 5 minutes, and my mind was just blah, 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 right nonstop. So I was like, okay, let's rein it in. 2 minutes, and I was trying to meditate in utter silence for 2 minutes until
Mm,
somebody, one of my dear friends, was like, have you ever done a guided meditation? I was like, a who,
mm.
a what? And she introduced me to Insight Timer, where they have guided meditations, and I would start with 5 minutes. And when I got to 5 minutes, I was like, look at me, 5 minutes of meditating. Like I couldn't do 2 minutes a few minutes ago. It really does build your skill over time. But I hadn't heard the 60 seconds. I like that. I like
Yeah.
that a lot.
Yeah, and I recommend that, not just for meditation, but for anything. If you want to create, if you
Sure.
want to write, if you want to learn an instrument, whatever it is you want to do, if you want to do a headstand, you know, set a,
Yeah, yeah.
just start with 60 seconds and you will be surprised by how you respond to that. You're like, 60 seconds? What? And then you actually do it. You're like, oh my God, that was the longest 60 seconds of my life. Or
Yes.
whoa, that actually flew by. That's so awesome. I actually can do more. One way or
Yeah.
another, you will find where you're at. Okay, if 60 seconds is too much for a headstand, for example, maybe 10 seconds,
Sure. Yeah.
and
Yeah, yeah.
building, like you said, it is a practice. It's not about perfection, it's about
Mm-mm.
improvement. So I was
Correct.
doing meditation for a year and a half, and I hadn't seen a counselor for a few years. I was still working in the medical field, more part time, doing more administrative work than hands-on patient care. And I could feel that a change was coming. I was starting to approach my late 20s, and so I was like, okay, I've done everything I can. I right when I found meditation, I quit cold turkey, all the pills, all the pharmaceuticals. I
Mm,
have been pharmaceutical
that's
pill
powerful.
free for almost 6 years, not even aspirin. So that was just a big turning point of like I flushed everything down the toilet, just like get these bottles out of my house. I don't need temptation in my house. And I really committed to strengthening my mind because I realized that was the point of meditation, is strengthening the
Yeah.
ability to harness the power of the mind and not being a slave to it.
Right.
So about a year, a little over a year later, I'm like, okay, what's next? I've always had this like insatiable thirst for growth, for what's next, what more can I squeeze out of life?
Yes.
That's been a common theme, shall we say, within my life, is how much more can I grow? How much more pleasure can I experience? How much more life can I live? And then that was around the time that cannabis became legal in Oregon. So I was like, okay,
Mm,
let's see if I can incorporate cannabis in my meditation journey. But because I was so scientific minded and because I had that religious indoctrination, I had to work through even more layers now were coming up of, drugs are bad, or drugs are, the gateway to hell, or you're going to become stupid.
yes.
And, all of those things. And, still working in the
Yes.
medical field, I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to lose my job. And then I was like, well, what does it matter? It's not like I'm going to be a doctor anyway. And so I literally went all scientific method on it. I got a journal. I measured out like how many grams, how did I feel before, how did I feel after, and for like over a year, I was like meticulously recording it. It was a little absurd, I'll be
Yeah.
honest. Right? But it was what I needed in the moment to help me break free. And the more I intentionally used cannabis to meditate, I was discovering, that peace within that was effortless. And I was like, okay, I really want to tap into this without the use of a substance. Because I'd kind of tapped into it by meditation alone. But then I felt like, again, I was plateauing. So I brought the cannabis and that was helping me expand. I was like creating more, I was writing more. Like, well, there has to be a way to tap into this without being reliant on a substance, because I was noticing that same patterns of addiction coming up within me in cannabis
Interesting.
use.
Hmm.
You know, it's the pattern of addiction is the same regardless of the substance, whether it's a pill,
Correct.
a plant, a habit, whatever. I was noticing that. So I spent some time researching psychedelics, and I attended my first psychedelics conference in Ashland, Oregon, and that's where I met a shaman woman in the indigenous teachings, and she ended up becoming my teacher for over 2 years. And that was my first introduction to shamanism, to earth based spirituality. And that really
Hmm.
resonated with me. And fast forward a year later, I went and received my elder initiation and training. And then I went on my vision quest journeys. I was intentionally using psychedelics. I learned about how to use these keys to unlock different aspects and how the integration happens sober, with time and space to like process what has come up. So I was starting to gather all the tools that I had discovered within myself in meditation, all the tools that I had
Hmm.
been, taught with the different counselors that I'd sat with, all of the knowledge that I had learned in college studying psychology, sociology, anatomy, physiology. I started to just bring all of this together to kind of like figure out how to be in the human experience. And as I
Hmm.
was continuing to refine my tool belt, shall we say, of how to help myself, I was um, I was still painting, I was still creating, I was writing a lot more, um, and I was also, doing massage work for other people. I'm a massage therapist as well, so I was like doing house calls, and as I'm doing massage with other people, I'm just sharing with them, things that have helped me as they're telling me their stories. And it
Sure.
turned into, somebody once said to me, they're like, "Do you do this for a living?" I was like, "No, but I do get paid for it." And it just kind of like, it just kind of coalesced. It wasn't something that I intentionally sought out to become. I didn't seek out to become a spiritual teacher. I didn't seek out to be a trauma informed coach. I didn't seek out to be a sound healer. It was more of like my own evolution and me just showing up in witness of my life and sharing my tools with others made me realize that I actually had a lot of value to offer. I had a lot of knowledge, I had a lot of wisdom. And wisdom for me is
Hmm.
the integration of knowledge, experience, and innocence. The return of innocence, shall we say. And so that's, that then I was just continuing to show up for clients. And then about 2.5 years ago, I hit another big turning point in my life. My brother passed away, And around the same time, I went through a very difficult separation. And, when my brother passed away, I became an orphan and an only child. It's like my world suddenly
Mm.
collapsed
Oh,
into
wow.
itself. And I had to take a step back from showing up for clients. I was leading sound healing circles, guiding others through, their own using the teachings of my shamanic elders that I'd sat with for many years, incorporating a lot of the Western modalities into it. And I was just kind of like telling everybody the same thing. So I was already feeling a little burnt out, just like I'm just like
Mm.
saying the same thing again and again, and I'm not growing and I'm not seeing growth in my life. And then when my brother passed, that was like a full stop again in my life. It felt like another turning point. Like I felt when I turned 25, like, what do I do now? He's the only family that I had. A lot of, what I was doing was with the intention of reuniting with him. He lived in a different country. I hadn't seen him since I had left India.
Oh, wow.
So I've taken this last 2 years to just kind of sit with myself. And as I was, just sitting with myself, I'm like, I really love my art. Anybody who's looked at my art has said that it changes their lives. So I'm gonna come out of the closet as a spiritual artist. And I was living with my ex at the time. I took over the house for 2 months. I turned it into a gallery, and I had this amazing show on Earth Day where I turned the entire house into a gallery. I had my art all over the house. I mean, I had almost like 8 years worth of art to show.
Oh,
So
yeah.
I put my art out there, and I was very well received. I created a website which is available for viewing with all of my art. I have a lot of my originals available for adoption, prints, and one of a kind pieces. So I have that aspect of me. So as I took a break from showing up in healing work for other people and myself, just to process grief, I shifted
Hmm.
back into concentrating full time on my art. And
Yeah.
I launched my art website. I created the show. I currently run a gallery out of my home. And I also self published my first book of meditation poetry. And now I'm in this transition again where my art is just kind of going back to where it was, which was more of a
Hmm.
passion, a way to just, have fun at the end of the day. And my attention, because I feel like I have processed enough of my grief, and I have also had enough time to sit and reevaluate the direction of my life. I'm approaching my mid 30s now. So I'm, several years past the diagnosis of 30 where I couldn't use
Yes.
my hands
The
anymore.
horrible
Like, look at
date.
these
Yes.
fingers go. I'm changing the world one brushstroke, one word at a time. So I definitely feel like
Exactly.
I am back in my mojo, so to speak,
Hmm.
of
Hmm.
okay, now I'm ready to be of service again. But how can I really make an impact without how can I make the most impact, I ought to say. And so I've spent the last few years creating a lot of self paced content that can be
Hmm.
easily downloaded. And it's basically like content that carries you from grade 0 through 12 to just kind of help you, make micro adjustments in everyday life. Taking all of my years of personal experience and training. So it's a combination of both professional training and personal experience, shamanic wisdoms, Western scientific modalities, bringing it all together, coalescing into content to help
Yeah.
others, just from the very basic of like, okay, I my life is a freaking mess. Okay, laundry's piling up, dishes are everywhere, I don't know what to do. The most simple practice I share is stop, slow down, take a breath, observe, proceed from centered heart. So I have teachings and practices that can take someone from that base level of absolute rock bottom, because I've been
Yeah.
there, to a place where they can actually start, feeling more at peace with their life, and then expand into their soul mission, into their gifts. And I recently opened a group in my Facebook page called Thriving HSP Portal. As I was going towards my 30s and I finally felt safe enough within my body to start working through my emotions, I realized that I am a highly sensitive
Yeah.
person. I've been put on the autism spectrum, on the neurodivergent spectrum. These are just labels that I use to help bring understanding rather than attachment. And so I've learned that a lot of my tools and tips and things that I use are really, while they're helpful to all humans, they're really very much specific to those who are highly sensitive and to those who have also experienced complex trauma. And I feel like, and this is just my personal opinion, and I feel that those who have gone through complex traumas become highly sensitive.
Oh,
You can either be born with high sensitivity or you become highly sensitive from complex traumas that you've experienced because your nervous system is literally affected at a core
right.
level. And so a lot of my work now is okay, here's your classes from 0 to 12. Go do it on your own, build your own confidence, build your own
Sure.
discipline, build your own stamina. And then I come in at the quote unquote collegiate level to just, push you through the final stages because that's where I find myself to be most
Yeah.
effective rather than walking you through the baby steps. Here is the tool. Be self empowered. I know you can do this because
Yes.
I
Yes.
did. Here's my 20 years of wisdom, in a nice little package. I was actually talking with a sister last week of like, I'm having feelings around the fact that this course that she was beta testing for me. I'm having feelings around the fact that this course that has taken me 7 years to create, I'm watching it transform your life in 7 weeks. I'm having feelings about this.
Yeah.
But that's really like the point, right?
Oh,
The point
sure.
is to not go through life alone. The point is to really, you know, sh- come into our own power, come into our fullness, and then share our wisdoms. Because for me, the healing work is about returning to the innate state of joy, of health, of innocence, of divinity.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's this concept that we need to heal ourselves. Well, we're already healed and whole, but there's just layers of trauma and
Yes.
programming and things that needs to be decluttered and deprogrammed and just, moved away slowly and gently. And so,
It's really just a shedding of layers
right,
process.
exactly.
I have so many thoughts on everything that you just said. I am like, oh yeah, that. Oh yeah, this. Oh yeah, I'll do my best to come back to all of them. But through your entire journey, what I have heard you say on repeat is, I am here to be a healer. All the way from your scientific approach of wanting to be a doctor, all the way to what you're doing now. And the way any healer becomes a healer is learning how to heal themselves,
Absolutely.
right? So like that, like every interest that you've had, even your art is a tool to use for healing. Like creativity in and of itself is the path back to ourselves to connect with that divinity within us, I think. Um, and I think it's interesting also that you were focused on the mind and heart.
Mhm.
Each time you've shifted, it comes back to the mind and heart for you. Writing and art, mind and heart.
Oh, you're right. A lot of my art pieces have either heart or brain or some aspect of that within it. You're so right about that.
Yeah. Because I think, and this is a connection I'm just now making, I think healing is really the connecting of the mind to the heart. That's where
Mm.
healing comes from, is these two very different sides of ourselves, if we want it, because we want to think our mind is who we are, and it's not. But being able to connect what we're thinking up here to what we're feeling in our heart, that is where I think true healing is coming from. And the disconnect, what we have to heal from, all the trauma and all the shit that happens in our lives, is kind of shedding those layers and being able to connect those sides of ourselves again. Anyways, that's the theme I'm seeing in your story.
No, I love it. And you're absolutely touching on the core of, my work. My foundation, Drasmin DreamWorks, is an ecocentric foundation devoted to bridging science, spirit, and love.
Right.
That those three main points are the fulcrum for everything else that I do, that I create. And I actually remembered a verse, a Bible verse. You give a man a fish for a day, you feed him for a day, but you teach a man to fish, you feed him for a life.
Right.
So as I was going through my journey, I realized that the most effective way to be a healer was through becoming an educator of self healing. And so that is where my focus is.
Well, yeah, because when you were talking about your self help content, let's call it that, the self help industry is growing and of utmost focus right now because it's so needed. And but what you were touching on was that there's so much of it at a very basic level that we can do for ourselves. That is why the self help is there, because you can just read a
Mhm.
book, take a course, whatever, and take those baby steps to kind of build that foundation. That work can be done on your own, and in most cases should be. But what you also touched on was we get to a point where we can no longer do it on our own because we're not meant to. We are not meant to do human life all by ourselves. And that's why you go connect with a coach, a mentor,
Mhm.
whatever sort of, healer, mentor that you're needing, because that person can help bridge that gap and get you that little nudge, that little gentle nudge to that next
Absolutely.
leap that you're looking to take.
Absolutely.
I love it. Okay, so let me ask you some of my questions. So when you look back through this story of yours, I find it hugely inspirational. But what do you think is the most inspirational aspect of that story? What inspires you most?
I not only survived, I am now thriving. And the fact that I have gone through some of the most horrific things with very little, actually no support from family. My blood family wants nothing to do with me because it's easier for them to deny and reject the reality of what happened to me over supporting me. The fact that I have been able to get through life
Right.
because of my own indomitable will, shall we say, my refusal, I do not accept. I do not accept.
I do not accept.
And the kindness of strangers. There have been many beautiful humans who have come into my life,
Oh, yes.
um, and supported me and loved me in the most unexpected ways. That has really carried me through the
Yeah.
kindness, the love that has come through unexpected ways, and I'm still working through, it still comes up. And I feel that this is probably just going to continue coming up in waves. Grief is in waves where I have gone through
Oh, for sure.
some horrific shit and I chose to not let it break me. Well, let's be honest, it did break me a couple of times, but I chose to not remain broken. I chose to say, life is a gift.
Oh, yes.
Even though I have made suicide attempts, even though I have overdosed, even though I have made decisions, I chose to value myself until I got to the point where that's not even an option. I've done enough soul work and come into enough understanding of the laws of
Yeah.
life to understand that, suicide is just not an option anymore. And after my brother passed, I definitely went through that wave of, why the hell am I still here? Take me, God. I don't want to be here anymore.
Oh,
Lightning, a
sure.
rusty nail, anything. Because I was
Rusty
like
nail.
writing my journal, like, come on, how much more of me? But that is the gift. With great power comes great responsibility, but great power also demands great sacrifice.
Mm.
And I feel that I have sacrificed a lot, and a lot of it has been my own choice. And what
Mhm.
has really driven me is becoming the person I didn't have. I want to be the person that I didn't have.
Oh, yes.
I want to leave behind a
Yes.
legacy that shows people through my own work, through my embodiment, through my rise, because it's literally crawling out of the darkness, crawling through all of the
Mhm.
rejection of family, of lovers, of friends, and saying, you know what? Even though I walked quote unquote alone, even though I'm never alone, I'm always, protected and guided by my ancestors and angels and other guides in the human experience. Even though I was quote unquote alone with, friends and support showing up, sent beautiful miracles sent along the way, I still made it. So it doesn't matter what somebody has gone through. I truly believe that healing and thriving is possible.
Yes. It's so true. And along the way, when we when we encounter these difficulties, or we make choices that maybe we wish we had chosen differently, we want to look at it like we failed or we've made mistakes. I like to say all of that is just feedback and opportunity for learning a lesson. So when you look back at all of your lessons, what do you think the common theme is in them?
The common theme, I guess, if I look back in retrospect, is to trust myself more. I was so broken down in my trust as a child that I had this distorted belief until a few weeks ago that the only way I could be a valid member of society, shall we say, was if I was doing something. And 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 so in a way, that idea of I need to be doing something saved my life. Yet adversely, it didn't allow me to also experience the beauty
Right.
of the different miracles and the love that did show up, because I was so hyper focused on my idea, my myopic mindset of what love and support should look
Yep.
like, that I was blinded to not see that love was showing up in the ways that I needed,
Mhm.
not in the ways that I
Yes.
wanted.
Yes. Well, the universe always provides what we need, regardless of if it's what we want.
Exactly.
Um, so when you look back at the younger you, what advice would you give her?
It's okay to stop and take a nap. It's okay to stop and yeah, that's the biggest thing I would tell her. It's okay to stop and take a nap. It's okay to say no.
Oh, that's such good advice.
And more importantly, trust your yes. There's so many times where I didn't lean into my yes because of the pain from past experiences
Ooh.
that I self sabotaged, or I created friction that then pushed away goodness in my life. So I would give her those three pieces of
Hmm.
advice. It's okay to stop and take a nap, honor your no, and lean more into that yes.
Yeah, that's really good advice. I hope somebody's listening to that. Okay, so then you've already answered this question, but I think it warrants repeating. So, what do you now believe is possible for your own life?
Anything, truly. I spent the first 25 years of my life surviving.
Hmm.
And I was meditating, on these questions, that I realized that I have spent the last 10 years of my life building a bridge, shall we say, from survivor to the now.
Hmm.
And now it's like I'm about to complete my seventh regeneration cycle in the human experience. And so now I feel like I'm finally starting to truly live my life.
Hmm.
I'm no longer in survivor mindset, even
Hmm.
though it does come up sometimes. I'm no longer just doing the work to build ground beneath me. And so now I finally get to experience and reap the fruit of my labor, so to speak. Now I get to call in a partnership that is healthy and actually thrive in that partnership.
Hmm.
Now I get to attract like minded community to create a family with, a chosen family with.
Hmm.
Now I get to see, all of my hard work changing the lives of other people. So I believe that I will be, making the billions of dollars here. I do believe that I will be, building those schools and building those centers for survivors to
Hmm.
come and receive the teachings that not only I offer, but many other, like-minded leaders. I do have a vision for that, that they can come and just receive that HR, that human rehabilitation, in a singular place to really just hold them in a way that I wasn't held. I believe, that I can truly change the world, or at least leave behind a structure or several structures that can be carried forward by my descendants to also simultaneously heal the world. The reason that
Hmm.
there's so many humans that are hurting is because the earth is hurting. And so I finally see now that all of the dreams that I had as a child are possible. yet in a much more magnanimous global level scale than I ever dreamed was possible. And I have honestly no idea what any of it looks like. I can just feel it.
Yes. Well, that's how you get there, but the feeling is the key. But I think you've touched on a couple things. So this idea of going from survival mode to thriving is it is the healing journey, right? Breaking out of these old patterns and habits that quite honestly have saved lives, right? We create those coping mechanisms because they worked and they kept us safe. And when you're in survival mode, like you need that. And being able to get to the point in your life where you're like, okay, that served me once, thank you. And being able to let it go and choose a different path moving forward because it no longer is serving you is the key, I think, that you've touched on, on repeat here. And I was just thinking, as you're describing your big vision and your big goal, the who you want to leave the legacy for is different, but the feeling behind what you want to create and why is the same as mine. My people are the single moms and the homeless. And
Mm.
I don't think I ever correlated kind of why that was, but as you're describing it, I'm like, oh, yeah, yeah. It's like it's our experiences and our trauma builds that compassion for that group of people who is overlooked, who is not getting the support they need. And so being able to leave a legacy that helps not only heal yourself for the betterment of the people in your own life, but to be able to reach further than us, I think is
Yeah.
the whole purpose of humanity. But I love that your focus is on a whole different set of people that I didn't even have line of sight to. You know what I mean? This is why we all have these experiences.
And that's really the beauty of these conversations and more of us speaking our stories, because we realize that we're all contributing to the greater whole. We
Hmm.
all have the singular drive and desire, which is to feel good, and
Yes.
to witness that good feeling in other people. Yet we can't rescue the world. As a child, I was like, I can save the world, I can save all the
Yes.
babies. And
Yes.
now it's like, well, that's not exactly true, but I can definitely train others, or
Hmm.
leave some kinds of systems behind, or leave my own story behind. If nothing else, my own journey of going from surviving to thriving is a legacy in itself, and everything else is a
Absolutely.
sweet bonus. I get to
Yes.
live my life now, and
Yes.
that to me is the greatest gift. That to me is, the I have arrived.
100%.
I have arrived at my biggest goal. And then everything else that blossoms from that is just a bonus.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that is so beautiful and accurate and true. And the reason I'm doing this podcast is to highlight those stories because you're right. You're absolutely right. Like you thriving is the win, but somebody else being able to see that is the first ripple. It's them seeing what's possible. It's the expander for their own life. And then when this is one of the mentors that I follow, she always says she teaches on money mentality for women specifically. That we need more money in the hands of good-hearted people because money allows you to just shine who you really are. And the more money a good-hearted person has, the more good they can do in the world. So it is only beneficial for people to have more money because they are going to go out and do amazing things like build orphanages and schools. And, I want to provide homes for homeless people. And it's all needed. It's all needed. I love it. I love it. Well, okay. So, my last question for you is how can people find you?
So the easiest place to find me is Facebook, Drasmin, my name twice, and then all of my links are in there. If I start going off on the list, they're like, "Wait, what? I need to pause. Is the spelling right?" So
Yes.
Drasmin on Facebook is the easiest way to find me, and all my links are on there. And my art website, which is www.dd Drasmin DreamWorks, OM, and SPA.com. Those are the two ways that someone can reach out and contact. I'm fairly active on Facebook, and my email is Drasmin DreamWorks at gmail.com.
Perfect. And I will include all of the links that you gave me in the show notes so people can go see any specific one of those. But I like to ask the question verbally as well.
Yeah.
Well, I cannot say thank you enough. I really appreciate you spending time with me today, and it was a pleasure to get to know you.
Deeply, deeply received. Thank you, Shauna, for having me here today.
Did you like this episode or did you love it? Inquiring minds want to know. The best way to support this show is to subscribe and leave a review. I can't wait to hear what you have to say. Thank you so much for listening. Until next time.